Davenport.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and I will be sharing my time with the member from Joliette. So it's an absolute pleasure.
From Joliette has already spoken, so the honourable member is not going to be able to share her time. But she can share her time with somebody else if she'd like. But
okay.
The honourable member for Davenport.
While we're figuring that out, I will speak to this, Madam Speaker. I do want to say that it's an absolute pleasure for me to be speaking on behalf of the residents of my riding of Davenport on Bill C-100, an act to implement the agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Indeed, this is going to be my last speech in this 42nd Parliament, and I'm delighted to be speaking on such an important topic. Now, Madam Speaker, before I speak to a C-11, I just want to marvel at the accomplishment of our federal government over the last few years in signing not one, not two, but 3 trade agreements since we came into office in late 2015. So very proud that we have signed the Canada-Europe Trade Agreement, the CPTPP, and now we're talking about the USMCA. So all of these 3 agreements gives Canada tariff-free access to 1.5 billion customers around the world. And this is absolutely amazing, Madam Speaker. And I'd also like to point out that Canada is the only country to have a free trade agreement with each of the G7 countries. I think both of these are remarkable things to note. For us to be very congratulatory in the fact that we've been able to accomplish this over the last few years. And I think it'll truly be beneficial for Canada, for economy moving forward. As you know, Madam Speaker, we are a trading nation. We're a massive geographic country, but we are small in terms of people. And indeed, for our economy to be strong, both now and moving forward, we do need these trade agreements. I do want to point out 2 other trade agreements that I particularly follow because they have direct impact on key groups in my riding, which is the Hispanic and the Brazilian community. I know that in March 2018, our Minister of International Trade launched negotiations around Mercosur, which is a trading bloc with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Again, a really important market for us to be looking at, very important for many members of my particular community, and I'm delighted that we've embarked on this, and I hope to hear about its conclusions, hopefully by the end of this year or early next year. The other thing I wanted to mention, just because I think it's also important for a group that I'm very proud to be a part of, is the Turkish community. There was very recently, on June the 8th, the signing of a JETCO between the Honorable Rusken Pekin, the Turkey's Minister of Trade, and the Honorable and our Minister of International Trade Diversification at the G20 in Japan. So we signed a JETCO to basically say that we wanted to further trade and investment between our 2 countries. We want to put a specific emphasis on small and medium enterprises, on strategic venture initiatives, and technical and scientific cooperation. So I'm delighted at that. I currently serve as the chair of the Canada-Turkey Parliamentary Friendship Group, and I know this is something that's exciting for both countries, and I think will be of benefit for both of us as well. So, Madam Speaker, you know, I was mentioning that in my downtown West Riding of Davenport, they're very supportive of trade agreements, and part of it is because over 52% of them are actually born outside of Canada. And for them, trade is not only, increasing trade between countries is not only beneficial for Canada overall, it's also a way for many of the diaspora, or many of the people in my community, to build closer relations for their home countries or the home countries of their parents or grandparents. And I find this particularly endearing. So they're very, very positive on trade agreements and are absolutely delighted at this new CUSMA. So I'm going to give a few facts and figures, and I don't think I'm going to say anything that you haven't heard many, many times before, Madam Speaker, but I think it's important for me to reiterate. So the North American Free Trade Zone is the biggest economic region in the world, encompassing 22 trillion US dollars in terms of our regional market, and encompasses more than 480 million consumers. This new updated agreement preserves Canada's market access into the United States and Mexico, securing our most important trading relationship. And I'd say, Madam Speaker, I'm delighted that this is increasing trade between all three countries, but I also like that it's also strengthening our relations between Canada and the U.S. and also corresponding between Canada and Mexico. So Canada's preferential access to these markets is vital to the continued prosperity of Canadian workers whose livelihoods rely on trade. Now, Madam Speaker, as you know, we did have some concerns after we signed the original agreement, which I believe was on November 30th, 2018. And the reason we had some concern is because the U.S. had imposed some steel and aluminum tariffs. But I'm very, very glad to say, Madam Speaker, that after months of hard work, and effort from our government, particularly our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Finance, our Prime Minister, Canadians are now in a very different situation. We have secured a full lifting of the steel and aluminum tariffs, and despite the Conservatives' call to drop our retaliatory measures, we have held firm. We have stuck to our principles, and there are no longer tariffs on our steel and aluminum, which I'm absolutely delighted about. So in terms of benefits, the new agreement preserves NAFTA's Chapter 19, which is the binational panel, which will settle disputes between our countries on any trade issues. Chapter 19 provides Canada with recourse to an independent and impartial process to challenge U.S. or Mexican anti-dumping and countervailing duties. And this is particularly important for our country's softwood lumber industry, which exported billions of dollars to the United States in 2017. Another benefit is the ease of trade going across our borders. We all know what it's like to wait in a lineup to cross the Canada-U.S. border, and the new NAFTA has new customs and trade facilitation measures that will make it easier for companies to move goods across the border. It'll also eliminate paper processes and provide a single portal for traders to submit documentation electronically. And then, of course, there's enhanced regulatory transparency and predictability, which will provide additional assurance for exporters that their goods will make it to the new market. The other benefit of the agreement is that there's a new chapter on small and medium-sized enterprises, which I believe, Madam Speaker, is going to foster greater cooperation among all three countries in terms of small businesses. It's also going to increase trade and investment opportunities. And as you know, Madam Speaker, the small businesses are the backbone of our economy here in Canada. And I think that they're delighted at this particular addition. We've talked quite a bit over the last, I think for a lot of today, about the progressive elements of the deal. And in particular, I want to mention a couple of them. The first is the agreement's labor chapter, which its key aim is to level the playing field on labor standards and working conditions in North America. And it also contains commitments to ensure that national laws and policies provide protections for fundamental principles and rights at work. The chapter also includes unprecedented protections against gender-based discrimination that are subject to dispute settlement, and there is also specific provisions around sexual orientation, sexual harassment, gender identity, caregiving responsibilities, and wage discrimination. As you know, Madam Speaker, gender equality and women's economic empowerment are important priorities for our government. They're also important priorities in spurring economic development and in making sure that trade works for everyone. And of course, this new agreement is also very strong on the environment, and I think that's top of mind for all Canadians right now, particularly since we've now officially declared a national climate emergency. I think that the environment will be top of mind not only for our government, but all governments right around the world. So the new and comprehensive environment chapter includes ambitious environmental provisions, including core obligations for countries to maintain high levels of environmental protection and robust environmental governance. Now, Madam Speaker, I know I'm running out of time, so I've mentioned how many? 2? 11 minutes? Oh, since I have 11 minutes, I will continue with all the benefits of the new NAFTA. I'm delighted to be speaking for more on this. So I'll continue on the benefits of the environment. So in terms of additional benefits, the updated NAFTA, or the USMCA, also introduces new commitments to address global environmental challenges, such as illegal wildlife trade, illegal fishing, and the depletion of fish stocks, species at risk, conservation of biological diversity, ozone-depleting substances, and marine marine pollution. And of course, you know, Madam Speaker, that Canadians care about the environment and are delighted that we have these additional provisions. I'll tell you, you know, I always like hearing, you know, from third parties in terms of what they think about the agreement. And so I want to sort of highlight some of the key third parties and what they have said about the benefits of this agreement. And then I'm going to go on as to the benefits for the cultural industry, which is really also very important for my riding of Davenport. So the Business Council of Canada said, we applaud the government's success in negotiating a comprehensive and high-standard agreement on North American trade. And they've also said that the new NAFTA maintains our country's preferential access to the United States and Mexico, Canada's largest and third largest trading partners respectively, while modernizing long outdated elements of the North American Free Trade Agreement. I'd also like to say that I have a wonderful quote also from one of our former prime ministers, the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney, who was the chief negotiator in the original NAFTA, as you'll recall, Madam Speaker. And he said NAFTA got what it wanted. It was a good deal. And so he wholeheartedly endorsed this as well. And because we talked a little bit about labor provisions, I also have a wonderful quote from Hassan Youssef, who's head of the Canadian Labour Congress, who said, you know, we get it right on labor provisions, or this new agreement gets it right on labor provisions, including provisions to protect workers against employment discrimination on the basis of gender. So as you could tell, Madam Speaker, there's quite a bit of support for the new NAFTA. And you could tell that we've got a number of third-party groups who provide these wonderful quotes. What I'd like to spend maybe a couple of minutes on now is just the positive impact of this new updated agreement on cultural industries in Canada. As you may know, Madam Speaker, Davenport is home to, I think, one of the largest communities of artists, of creators, of those working in the cultural industries. And so whenever I see any new agreements or any new announcements, I'm always looking to see how it is that's going to benefit not only artists in my community, but artists right across this country. And indeed, there are many benefits. The USMCA will help strengthen Canada's unique cultural and identity, including the French language and the independent Canadian media. The agreement will preserve Canadian cultural exception that was demanded by Canada, especially in the digital world, and it protects our cultural industries and more than 650,000 jobs across Canada. The cultural exception is essential for preserving identity and continuing to showcase our vibrant Francophone culture, which is unique in North America. And I just want to point out, because I'm always proud of them, I have a really wonderful growing Francophone community in my downtown West Riding of Davenport. And we have a wonderful group called Shock FM who promotes really wonderful radio programs and really promotes the French language and culture and Francophone culture, not only across Toronto, but beyond. I want to talk about some additional benefits. So without a cultural exception, federal and provincial tax credits and program funds to support our newspapers and magazines. The cultural exception also protects Canada's broadcasting system, ensuring sustained investment in content created and produced by fellow Canadians. And I also have some quotes about those people from various leaders within the cultural industry who support the new USMCA and say it is beneficial for the industry. So I'll give you a quote from SOCAN. Today is a great day for Canadian creators. SOCAN would like to thank the Canadian government for its efforts to defend the interests of Canadian cultural sector and to provide greater protection for our creators. And that is from Eric Baptiste, who's from SOCAN. I also have a great quote from the Canadian Media Producers Association. Throughout the NAFTA negotiations, the federal government consistently identified cultural exemption as a key priority. In securing this exemption in the new agreement, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the entire negotiating team have stood tall for Canada and defended our cultural sovereignty. We applaud their successful efforts and congratulate the government on this new deal. And then I also have a great quote from Margaret McGuffin, who is from the Canadian Music Publishers Association. And she's indicated Canada's music publishers and their songwriting partners welcome the trade agreement reached between the governments of the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And finally, I have a wonderful quote from Magazines Canada from Melanie Rutledge, who said, Magazines Canada's nearly 400 members across the country congratulate the Prime Minister, congratulate our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Heritage, and all the other players within the Canadian government who played a role in negotiating this updated free trade agreement. And she said, we're especially pleased with the cultural exemption, which applies in both the analog and digital spaces. This digital inclusion will be critical to Canadian magazines and other cultural industries in the years to come. So as you could see, Madam Speaker, lots of support from artists and those in the cultural industries. And I think I'll also mention a couple of other things, a couple other areas that I think it'll be very supportive. I think that, as you know, our government, and, as you know, Canadians are very proud of our healthcare system. We see it as part of our identity. And so one of the key things that we've done is that this agreement continues to support our healthcare system. I'm trying to think what else I want to be able to mention in terms of, maybe I'll mention, let me see what else I want to mention here in my final moments. Maybe I'll just mention this. The new agreement, Madam Speaker, is a renewed understanding between Canada, the United States, and Mexico on the significance of our mutual trade agreement. It preserves key elements of our trading relationship and incorporates new and updated provisions that seek to address 21st century trade issues to the benefit of all Canada's provinces and territories. So, Madam Speaker, I didn't expect to speak more than 10 minutes, and I've spoken for about just over 17 minutes now. But it's been a pleasure. This really is a key and fundamental agreement between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. As I mentioned, our economy greatly depends on trade. I think that Canadians maybe they were worried for a while as to whether or not we would finally have an updated agreement. I think they could now set aside that worry. We do now have that updated agreement in place. I think we've charted a course moving forward. It gives us a wonderful foundation from which to continue to build our businesses between Canada and the U.S., Canada, U.S., and Mexico, and Canada and Mexico. And I think that it will serve us well as we develop closer business relations and as we all seek to improve our economies moving forward. And I think with that, Madam Speaker, I'm just going to wrap up my comments, and I want to say thank you again on behalf of the residents of Davenport for allowing me this wonderful opportunity to be able to speak on this very important bill. And I encourage everybody in the House to support it. Thank you.